Welcome to the VegasInsider.com Bet and Collect podcast.
I'm here to collect.
Hosted by Kevin Rogers.
Who's the big winner here tonight at the casino?
Your source for the best sports betting information to help you dominate your bookmaker.
Thought you was laying.
I'm laying. No, I'm taking it. I was taking it.
It's time to bet and collect.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Bet and Collect podcast here on VegasInsider.com for Thursday, March the 19th. Ready to talk about the NCAA tournament. It's on the docket today, Tony. We don't have the tournament to talk about.
My heart is broken, but there is fresh content to talk about, so we'll do that.
There is. Kevin Rogers and Tony Mejia with you. And yes, the coronavirus has knocked off the NCAA tournament, so we won't be able to talk about that and the mythical champion. And the good news is, though, the NFL somehow is totally bulletproof, that in spite of the coronavirus, which has obviously affected everyone's life out there, that the NFL free agency began this past week, and Tom Brady, the biggest name out there, does not decide to stay with the New England Patriots. Instead, he decides to go down to Florida, and not to Miami to play for the rival Dolphins, but to go to Tampa Bay to play for the Buccaneers, a franchise that has not seen the playoffs in over a decade. And Jameis Winston now done as the quarterback of the Buccaneers, and Tom Brady now going to Tampa Bay. And first, Tony, I guess the shock value of that, I'm not shocked he didn't stay with New England, but Tampa Bay, even though that was one of the teams obviously up on the list along with the Chargers and the Raiders, teams that he may think about going to, I cannot say, Tony, that I thought that Tom Brady would end up playing for Tampa Bay.
I mean, they were aggressively in the hunt for him, and it's a nice situation for a quarterback. You sit there in a pass-happy offense with Bruce Arians as your quarterback, and in your ear, a guy that everybody respects, and it's a new challenge. You mentioned not going to Miami. Obviously, that was an option. To be honest, I think this is a great challenge for Tom Brady to be in a new division. He's got a beatable division. Carolina and Atlanta have struggled. And I think New Orleans is beatable. So very interesting. And, we saw the Buccaneers go down to a 14-1 Super Bowl champion odd at Westgate from 60-1. And I think we'll continue to see free agents look to play with Tom Brady.
And the one thing about Tampa Bay, as you mentioned, Tony, that those numbers just totally dropped with him going to the Buccaneers. Obviously, a huge upgrade at quarterback for the Buccaneers, but also on the flip side, what I wonder is how much does Tom Brady have left in the tank? We saw how things ended last year in New England, the loss to Tennessee in the wild card round, and not having the same numbers he had in the past. Still an upgrade from Jameis Winston, because Brady's not going to throw interceptions, and he's a 6-time Super Bowl champion. But I also look at him going to the NFC as opposed to staying in the AFC, where now Kansas City is obviously an elite team. Baltimore is an elite team. You have the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Patriots. If the Steelers are healthy, they're in that mix. The AFC South is kind of a revolving door every single year. So you only had a few teams to deal with, where now in the NFC, you have San Francisco, who was in the Super Bowl this past year. You have the Cowboys. You have the Packers. You have the Seahawks. There are so many teams in this mix now, even Minnesota we can't forget about, that it's not going to be as easy for Tom Brady at this age to be in the playoffs automatically. I'm not even saying Super Bowl. The playoffs could even be a challenge, I think, for Tampa Bay this year.
Right. And I mean, Philadelphia, I think, is going to be better. They pick up a much needed corner and picking up Darius Slay this morning. So, yeah, you're absolutely right in that regard. Tom Brady's always going to have the pre-snap read down. And so now he's got receivers that can get open. He's got 2 tight ends and O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate that can really execute. Obviously, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, who really shifty, can get some plays in there. I think Scott Miller's an X factor. I'm going to trust Brady yes, his skills have diminished, but his intellect will be there. The challenge, I think, will really have him fresh for the season. And I'm definitely on board with the Bucs being potentially 9-10 win team, which will get them in the playoff mix.
And as far as win totals goes from DraftKings, they put out win totals, and the Buccaneers right now at 9. And even though the schedule has not been released yet, it'll come out in April. We do know the opponents for the Buccaneers as well as every team in the NFL, home and away. It's just we don't know when they play them. But as far as what the Bucs have this year, Tony, you have obviously the 3 teams in the NFC South: Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, home and away. But then after that, the Buccaneers will host the Packers, they'll host the Chiefs, Super Bowl champions, and host the Vikings. And you include the Saints in there. So 4 of 8 home games, they will get playoff teams from a year ago. Also, they get the 2 LA teams. They get the Chargers, no Phillip Rivers, and they get the Rams, who we don't really know how good they'll be. So you get 4 of 8 playoff teams from a year ago. On the road, though, this is interesting. Out of the 8 teams they play away from Raymond James Stadium, only 1 made the playoffs last year, that being the Saints, who they would draw anyway. But they go to Chicago. Now they have a quarterback controversy with Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky. Denver, who Drew Lock is the new man in charge. Detroit, assuming Stafford's healthy. The Raiders, they have Derek Carr, Marcus Mariota, and the Giants with Daniel Jones. So the schedule does not look very daunting on the road for the Buccaneers. So you think if you could find a way to get 9 or 10 wins there, it is possible because at least the tough teams they play are at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're going to be the team that everybody's talking about besides their favorite team this year. Obviously everybody monitors what goes on in the backyard, but all eyes will be on Tom Brady in a Tampa uniform, and that'll be interesting. Yes, his final throw of the past season was a pick 6. He still gave the Patriots a chance to win that game with limited receiving options. It was obvious, no Gronk hurt. And the fact that he had no legitimate number 1 ultimately was New England's downfall. If Josh Gordon is able to stay on that team, who knows? We could have had a completely different outcome.
And also they have the rumors, would Antonio Brown go to the Buccaneers perhaps? So Tampa Bay is obviously, they have the weapons. And Jameis Winston led the NFL in passing last year, which you would find weird that they would replace the leader in passing, but also we know that he led the league in interceptions too. He had 30 interceptions he threw. He also ended his season with a pick 6. So there's a little tie-in, Tony, that both Tom Brady and Jameis Winston ended their seasons with pick 6s last year.
You'd find it weird if you didn't have eyes. So Jameis, he'll move on. Very talented quarterback. I guess he's getting the LASIK now. But yeah, it just takes too many chances. I think Bruce Arians' life expectancy gets to grow for a couple of years because of not having Jameis to worry about. Tom Brady will take care of the football, and they'll be a better team for it. That defense last year was decimated by injuries, so that side of the ball is probably going to be much improved. They're in my backyard, but I'm not a Bucs fan at all. At the same time, I can see how Tampa fans are giddy right now.
Yeah, they should be. I mean, there's reason for excitement, and you look at the NFC South and what Tom Brady and the Buccaneers have to deal with. Atlanta was bad the first half of the season. They played better in the second half. They still have a good quarterback in Matt Ryan. The Saints with Drew Brees, it's almost the same situation as the Bucs, that you have a quarterback over 40, and Brees did break the touchdown record last year, and he was hurt for a bit, and the guy that replaced him is now also a starting quarterback in the division, Teddy Bridgewater with Carolina, under new head coach Matt Rule, with Cam Newton being done there. So obviously the quarterback talent that Tom Brady is going against in his division is not what it was from last year with Sam Darnold, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Josh Allen in the AFC East, or like we've seen in years past. So that's going to be a bit of a step up too, that Brady is going to face off against teams that have much better quarterbacks than he's used to in the division.
No, absolutely. I think for Brady, it's going to be the key being to protect him. And you have Ali Marpet coming back. Ryan Jensen, when he signed, was the highest paid center in the NFL. He has really dealt with injury woes, and Donovan Smith is coming back at tackle. You got to get another tackle in there. You have to make sure that you protect the guy. But if he's able to be the Tom Brady that we know, he'll make quick decisions, keep himself off the field and on the field. That'll be interesting. I don't think that he's going to break down. And again, I think this new challenge is going to invigorate him.
Now let's shift over to the Patriots and what this means for them with Bill Belichick. And for the first time in years, he does not have Tom Brady as his starting quarterback to begin the season. This goes back to 2001 when Drew Bledsoe was the starting quarterback, and then he got hurt against the Jets, that Mo Lewis, the injury with the lung, and then Brady came in and was the quarterback. And granted, even in 2008, remember, Tom Brady started the season, but he tore his ACL in the first half of that game against the Chiefs, and then it was the Matt Castle show the rest of the way. They won 11 games. So Tom Brady has been the starting quarterback in New England since 2002. Now it's Jarrett Stidham, the former Auburn quarterback, who, as of this moment, is the starting quarterback, and the Patriots are 30-1 to win the Super Bowl after being 12-1 before that. And I got to believe, Tony, that the Patriots are going to find some veteran out there, because you can't start the season with Jarrett Stidham. That can't be your guy moving forward.
Right. And is it Jacoby Brissett that's the odds-on favorite to return, with Indianapolis likely to move on in a different direction? Obviously, the Phillip Rivers rumors are out there. But, no, it's not going to be Stidham. They'll have to rely on their defense the way they did last year. Certainly can't write the Patriots off, but will a full season of Mohamed Sanu being healthy improve that receiving core enough to give whoever ends up under center a chance? They've got running backs, they've got the offensive line, and they've obviously got a top 3 defense. So don't bury the Patriots yet, but curious to see who ends up with Bill Belichick's offense.
Yeah, I'm not going to go as far to say that this is going to be a repeat of what we saw with the Warriors, that they lost Steph Curry and Klay Thompson was hurt and Durant left and the Warriors were a complete tank job. But there's a lot of Patriots that are leaving in free agency. So you kind of wonder if that would be the case. Not that New England will be a 4-12 team, but I find it hard to believe that they would still win this division with what they have constructed right now. I mean, you talk about other quarterbacks that are available. I don't think Belichick would go for Jameis Winston necessarily. And you have other quarterbacks that are off the board in a sense in free agency. And one of those who was never going to New England, but Phillip Rivers, you just mentioned, is going to the Indianapolis Colts for a 1-year deal. And the Colts in this AFC South obviously is very much up for grabs every year. That Tennessee, now they're going to be a different team with Ryan Tannehill starting the season from week 1 as opposed to Marcus Mariota, where the offense wasn't doing anything last year. And Tannehill got them to the playoffs, got into the AFC Championship, where they eventually lost to the Chiefs. Houston's a mess right now with what's going on. They trade DeAndre Hopkins to the Cardinals for nothing, it seemed like, and there was a lot of question marks around Bill O'Brien. But circling back to the Colts, Tony, that Jacoby Brissett was all right at times last year. They just couldn't sustain it the entire season. And Indianapolis, just looking at their opponents, they face 5 playoff teams from last year at home alone coming up this season, which includes the Ravens, Packers, and Vikings, past Tennessee and Houston inside the division. So, the Colts a 7-9 team, and Phillip Rivers wasn't great last year either.
No, he absolutely wasn't. And Brissett, I thought, did a fairly adequate job until T.Y. Hilton got hurt, and that receiving core was decimated by injuries most of the way. They do have one of the top offensive lines in football. So Phillip Rivers will at least have time to throw. He's got to be more responsible with the football. Good landing spot for him. And again, I think Brissett moves on and probably ends up in New England.
And the Colts right now 20-1 at the Westgate Superbook to win the Super Bowl. Now, as far as other moves that were made with quarterbacks on a lower level, Nick Foles gets traded from Jacksonville. That whole experiment blew up in their face quickly. He got hurt week 1, and then Gardner Minshew came in, and it was the Gardner Minshew show for a while, and then Foles came back. Foles didn't even win a start last year. He was 0-4 in his 4 starts with Jacksonville. He won a Super Bowl for Philadelphia a few years ago, but just didn't work out in Jacksonville, so they trade him to the Bears, where you're making that move if you're Chicago, Tony. I don't have a problem with it simply because it shows you don't have faith in Mitchell Trubisky. That's not your guy. And that's where you never know if Foles ends up starting the season or eventually becomes a starting quarterback ahead of Trubisky.
Yeah, and I think Trubisky, it's not the right system for him. And so they're going to be more comfortable turning it over to Foles, a veteran who can, make sure that you get some points every time you get down the field. Trubisky just too much of a wild card at this point. Maybe he'll mature and be better somewhere else, but I think his days are numbered in Chicago, and I think Foles is going to end up the starter week 1.
And the total right now, the win total is 7.5 for Chicago at DraftKings. So the Bears still in the division with Green Bay, with Minnesota, who traded Stephen Diggs to Buffalo. So we talk about some receivers, DeAndre Hopkins going to the Cardinals and Stephon Diggs going to the Buffalo Bills. And that will, circling back to the AFC East, Tony, now Buffalo, all of a sudden, a team to keep an eye out for to maybe win that division. That Josh Allen played better last year. They should have won that wild card game against Houston and Buffalo. They have the pieces, maybe not with Tom Brady in the division, but without Tom Brady in the division, where the Jets are still trying to figure it out. The Dolphins, after they had a nice finish to last year, they made a lot of moves. But Buffalo, though, they're trying to put it together where they're looking to make a run to win that division.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's going to be a much tighter division than we've seen in decades. You have Buffalo probably as the favorite, unless we really like who New England ends up with to replace Brady. And then you have the Patriots there, so long as they keep their defense together. The Dolphins have made significant defensive improvements to really diversify what they're going to be able to do scheme-wise. If they pick Tua Tagovailoa, I think they'll give him a redshirt year. So you get Fitzpatrick coming back. That's probably not a playoff quarterback, and then the Jets will be in the mix probably as a slight improved team. 10 wins probably gets that division, and there's only one playoff team out of that whole thing. But I think it's going to be a lot more parity in the AFC East.
And Buffalo at 8.5 wins, New England at 9.5, the Dolphins at 6, and the Jets at 6.5. So, and even the Jets played better the second half of last year. They had some questionable losses. They lost to the Dolphins. They lost to the Bengals. They had a big win late against Pittsburgh last season. And even having Sam Darnold out of the lineup, obviously, their offense totally tanked. But that's another team I wonder what, too, is the Jets. Still with Le'Veon Bell. If Darnold can get over the hump with Adam Gase. But, the Jets, it feels like year in, year out, still a lot of question marks there. And, you look at the rest of the AFC, Tony, in the AFC West, unfortunately, it's the Chiefs and everyone else. That the Broncos are still trying to get it right at quarterback, and now you have Drew Lock for a whole season. The Chargers are going to Tyrod Taylor. They're not going to try to find someone else in free agency. And the Raiders, if they could figure it out now in their first year in Vegas with Derek Carr or if it's Marcus Mariota, but unless Patrick Mahomes is hurt for the entire year, there is really no way to make an argument for any of those three teams to win that division.
Chiefs look like a 13-3 team. They're going to be tough to beat each week out. And, yeah, I think the X factor is probably the Raiders, depending on what home field advantage they're going to be able to manipulate out of Vegas. The Chargers, I think, are starting over. You look for them to draft a quarterback, too, at 6. So you've got a bunch of teams that will probably draft quarterbacks early and then redshirt him. I think Jordan Love is like a major riser now, kid out of Utah State. So he could be an option there. Denver, probably 8-8. Vic Fangio's defense should improve, but Drew Lock's not going to get a lot of production out of that offense. So yeah, you referenced it earlier at the beginning of the podcast that the NFC is going to be significantly more competitive than the AFC.
And I will say this, even though if you want to follow trends or however you want to do it, I'm going to give you a list right now, Tony, in this order: 49ers, Rams, Eagles, Falcons, Seahawks. Those are the last 6 NFC champions. Now, why I say that is we've had different NFC champions the last 6 years. So San Francisco, you had your opportunity to win the Super Bowl against Kansas City, and you blew it in the fourth quarter. The 49ers, Tony, I don't feel like are a team that will now be back in the NFC Championship, just because in all those other teams you saw fail somewhere, not even in they couldn't even get back to the Super Bowl. So that's why the wide open NFC, San Francisco is the favorite right now, but I can't see them getting back.
Yeah, it's truly astounding that the Saints aren't one of those teams that you mentioned. And so they'll be in the mix, and the Cowboys should be in the mix. And the Eagles should be back, and the Seahawks will be around, and the Packers. I think Aaron Rodgers has a lot to prove coming up. So, yeah, I mean, Bears should be improved if Foles is under center. I think the Vikings will be able to overcome losing Diggs. So it's going to be a free-for-all. And the Cardinals are going to be an X factor. So adding to that receiving core with DeAndre Hopkins, and then the second year for Kyler Murray to really showcase what he can do. He clearly much improved over over December. Really, the NFC is going to be very improved, and we'll see about 10 teams probably compete for playoff spots going into week 16 and 17.
And now Tampa Bay will obviously be in that mix, because we didn't think they would be in that mix going into this year if they didn't get Tom Brady. They were a 7-7 team with 2 weeks to go last season before finishing 7-9. And it definitely makes things very interesting to watch coming up for the 2020 NFL season. And hopefully we get the season started on time, and that's all we can really ask for. But at least with this coronavirus situation, that at least we have some sports and some future that we know to talk about. So that's always a good thing. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast. You could find us on Spotify as well as Apple Play and Google Play. It's good to be back after a week off. We're still in quarantine, but at least we can talk some sports. For Tony Mejia, I am Kevin Rogers, and we will talk to you again soon on the Bet and Collect podcast right here on VegasInsider.com.